Hey everyone, welcome to another video. This is probably the first video I'm making on undergraduate studying in the US, and I have Shaurya here. Shaurya, why don't you introduce yourself, who you are, what you're doing, and what are your immediate future plans?
Perfect. Hi, everybody. My name is Shaurya Sinha. I'm a recent high school graduate who is 18 years old, and I was recently admitted into Stanford University. I'm currently on a gap year, though, because of COVID-19, exploring tons of projects like filmmaking, this YouTube channel, hopefully traveling in the near future. And when I go to Stanford, I hope to major in symbolic systems, which is a multidisciplinary field with statistics, psychology, linguistics, and artificial intelligence.
That is awesome, man. So the reason why I never got to do an undergrad video is like I thought there was not an audience, but by seeing your channel, first of all, if you're not following Shaurya on YouTube, I'll leave his subscription link in the description. Go check it out. Um, the reason why I did not do an undergrad video is like I had a lot of doubts, a lot of questions about it. I couldn't find the right person. I've seen your videos and they just hit so perfectly with all the undergrad students. So why don't you describe the whole timeline of like when do you start thinking about your undergrad, like if you want to do your undergrad in US, and what does the timeline look like?
Right. I think there are mainly two questions to answer. The first of which being, what kind of an education do you want and whether the United States is the right place for you. I think there's a very particular kind of student who gravitates towards the United States. It's, an individual who doesn't necessarily know what they want to study exactly, or if they do know what they want to study, they have the requisite finances to go to the United States because it is an expensive process. Mm-hmm. And I think for me, I personally began thinking about applying to the United States in, I'd say probably since 6th grade and 7th grade. And that's only because I grew up in an environment where my parents had constantly told me about places like Stanford University. When I was really, really young, I actually used to live in San Jose, California. I'm still an Indian citizen, but the first 4 or 5 years of my life were in California, and I was right next to Stanford's campus. So the name had been thrown around me for a long period of time. And after a period of time, you ask, okay, I know about this place. How do you get to this place? And that's when, I started looking online, researching about undergraduate studies. And as a whole, there are just 5 key components. You have academics, which is how you're performing in school, which is really good, but everybody knows when it comes to US undergrad applications, that's not enough. You have to do something one step above just what you're doing inside the classroom. And that becomes your extracurricular activities. So whether it's debating, whether it's theater, whether it's, for me, it was student entrepreneurship and, starting in organization. All of those things that you do outside of the classroom, which can be related to your field of study, whether it's economics, computer science, psychology, those are things that US universities are really looking at. And as opposed to UK universities, because they really don't care. For them, it's all academic first and how you are as a student and an academic. The third thing that comes into play with the US application process is standardized testing. So you will have your SAT, you'll have ACT. Recently, College Board canceled all of the subject SATs. So that's one less test that you have to take. And the standardized tests I prepared for in my 11th and 12th grade. So I'd say extracurriculars and academics throughout high school, 9th grade to 12th grade, because that is the formative period of your high school years. And that's what colleges are looking at. And then testing is towards the end. The fourth piece is essays. So when it comes down to it, it's just like a postgraduate application, except US essays tend to be a lot more creative. You're supposed to show how you're an out-of-the-box thinker. You're supposed to show maybe your flair with language. You're supposed to show your ideas, who you want to be in the future. So I'd say it's a lot more unstructured than your typical statement of purpose that a UK university takes, or maybe like an MBA application takes. And then the last segment is letters of recommendation. So your teachers, your mentors, they're all allowed to write to these universities and communicate to them. So I'd say it's a long process. For me, mentally, it was like a 7, 8 year, 9 year, or possibly my whole life. I'd been thinking about going to the US. But in terms of the actual work you put in, it starts in 9th grade and you start laying the seeds, in my opinion, then.
Was it a taxing process because it was going on until 7 years or 6, 7 years, from 6, 7 years or so, or was it easy for you, or was there like a lot of, lot lying upon it, like, oh, what if I don't get in?
Yeah, I think For me, it was two things. One, because as a student, I was not the most like, okay, I'm going to ghar jaake padhai karni hai, get like 100 on 100. I was always told that get this much and this much will qualify you. And then after that, it doesn't matter. After that, nobody is going to ask you your marks. After that, they're going to ask you what you did when you got back home from school. So I was very excited by that thought. I was very excited by the fact that someone is interested in what I'm doing with my time apart from studying. So I focused all of my time and energy on that. So I'd say that in that sense, I was made for a process like that. I personally feel like I was built for a system like that, which is why I applied to the US. And on the second part, because I had been preparing for such a long time, it was a lot less strenuous and a lot less pressurizing for me than it probably was for people who started in 11th and 12th grade. You know, I talk to a lot of students who do like JE prep till 11th grade, realize they don't want to do it and then suddenly try and switch tracks to the US. That is a very like time crunching process, and it's very hard for students. So I'd say if you know you wanted to go to the US, if it's financially feasible for you, the long game is definitely what you have to pay. The odds are still slim because I did get rejected from every Ivy League at the end of the day, and Stanford it's all a crapshoot because the acceptance rates are so low and the competition rate is so high. But I think if you prepare well enough, you know, you have a really good shot.
What all universities did you apply for, and what all admits did you get?
So I applied to 15 universities. I applied to the university, so first the Ivy League, so Harvard, Princeton, Yale. I applied to University of Pennsylvania, University of Columbia. Then I applied to Stanford. I applied to Duke University. I applied to University of Southern California, University of Berkeley, University of Virginia and Michigan, you know, 2 state schools I also applied to, and then 2-3 more UCs. So I got a full scholarship from the University of Southern California. I got into University of Virginia, University of Michigan, got into Berkeley, got into Stanford, got into Duke, and then I was waitlisted/rejected at all of the Ivies for reasons only God will know.
Was there a reason why you did not accept the scholarship at USC and rather you're going to Stanford? I get the reason, or I get the
Right.
the motive behind it, but I want to hear from you.
So I think it was something that I spoke to my dad about, and you know, it's a full tuition scholarship is a lot of money.
Yeah, it's almost a crore if you put in Indian rupees or so.
It is, but then you also know that if you come from a country like India, education is just it's the most sacred thing that you can possess. So for my parents, the difference in the quality of education, or not even education, because I feel like education quality is good everywhere, the opportunities that you could get at a place like Stanford in a location like the Bay Area, surrounded by those professors, surrounded by those students, was enough to compensate for the fact that he would still pay full tuition. So I think that that's just a mindset. And he spoke to friends of his in the US and he asked them, you know, what do you think he should do? And they all said, obviously the full tuition scholarship. And he said, yeah, okay. And then in India, when he spoke to someone, they said, go for Stanford, like it's Stanford.
Okay.
So I think that's just like, it's a mindset cultural thing. And also the fact that we could afford to send me to Stanford.
Yeah, it's definitely a mindset culture thing. Like, because now that I've come here, I also think that, oh, you should be going for a full scholarship thing just because you want to be financially independent. But in India, it's like, even my dad's always been like that. Hey, don't worry about it. Just do what the best it is for you, and which will give you the best opportunities later on. Like, don't worry about these things. These things could be taken care of. Like, this is not such a big deal. But did you apply to all of the universities in symbolic systems, or was it different?
No, so symbolic systems was actually only a major offered at Stanford. And interestingly enough, I didn't even apply for symbolic systems at Stanford because the one issue with applying for a multidisciplinary field is you can confuse admissions officers because your application might only have 1 or 2 things, because realistically in a high school in India, linguistics, you don't know much of, you don't learn much of, you're not exposed much to it at all. So someone's reading your application and one of the things you're applying for is linguistics, they're not going to be able to make that match. So I very clearly applied for economics and psychology because a lot of my work was to do with entrepreneurship. A lot of it was to do with human biases and social psychology and understanding how that shapes our society. So I felt like there was a much greater connection between those fields in my work than, you know, a multidisciplinary field.
Right. Interesting. Give us a little bit about your background. Like, I know you started off early, but if somebody has to start from 9th to 12th, like what they are supposed to do and what you did, because you are kind of setting a path. Oh, this is how you get into Stanford. So tell us about that.
I think it's important to understand what a university like Stanford wants. So as far as I've understood, it's a very simple process. The universities like Stanford, they're betting on you when they give you an acceptance, and they think that you have the potential in some shape and form to change the world. The problem is, because of how competitive the process has become, everybody has changed the world before they get into a place like Stanford. It's almost like you're qualifying to get into a place which will help you change the world by changing the world. So when you're going into it, you have to be the best or one of the best at something. And the good thing about the process is it can be the best at anything. Whatever you like, they're looking for excellence in that particular field, whether it's cooking, culinary, the culinary arts. Maybe you write a cookbook, maybe you go on MasterChef, you do something that makes you one of the best in a particular field. They're also just looking for really curious people and people who will have an academic interest and then just explore it. So for me in 9th grade, I was really interested in filmmaking, and I was trying to think of, okay, where could I take my films? How could I take this to the next level? And I only had an iPhone. And I went and I volunteered in this foundation for, with children with disabilities. And that immediately took me aback, because I never made a film for a cause. And I really wanted to after that point in time. And what I also realized was that in a city like Gurgaon, you're very sheltered from the idea of disability. Like, my school will have one separate classroom where all the children with disabilities would study. So there was no interaction between me and a person with a disability. So when I went to that foundation and I saw all of the work they were doing, I quickly realized that I wanted to intersect film and disability and, create some change. And then eventually that led to me forming an organization where I was giving employment opportunities to individuals with disabilities. And then I finally found, my calling in high school by really trying to be a champion for disability rights, advocacy, and then speaking in multiple forums, and finally employment. So I think that if you start with something you really like, along the way, you're going to come across multiple opportunities, which will really ramp up your ability to impact the world. And that's what I communicated to Stanford as well. I gave them numbers. I told them how many people I'd employed. I told them how many individuals with disabilities I'd interacted with them. I told them how many films I'd made. And once they see the amount of impact you've made in high school, in any field you choose, they're much more likely to bet on you. They're much more likely to say, oh, this kid is going to go and do something like this in the future, or do something at this scale in the future.
Right. That is quite interesting. Contrary to the master's application, where they're focused on your undergrad degree, on the degree which you did, on your academics a lot more than how you as a person. Undergrad focuses everything you have done in school and everything you have done as a person in those times. How does a person kind of improves in that? And how does somebody gets in the mind of an admission committee who's seeing you as a person? Are you getting my question?
I think for them, the way they look at you, okay, so I'll tell you the way Stanford will evaluate an applicant. So there's going to be a regional officer, for India, and they're going to be reading all of these applications that kids send in for Stanford, and then they're going to go, they're still living in California, but if they're not, they'll go to California, they'll go to the regional committee, and they literally make a presentation about your entire application, and they'll pitch you, almost like you're pitching a business. They'll pitch students to the admissions committee and say, I want this kid because of these reasons. You have to give them those reasons. So I think that whenever, if you're pitching, the best thing people say for a pitch is, have a story. So what they pitch is your application story. So it's very important for you to realize that your entire application is going to be condensed into a story, and all of these little pieces are going to play a part of that story, which is who you are as a person. And if I look back at it now, it's almost a little unfair, because you're asking a 17 or an 18-year-old to figure out the story of their life and also deliver that story of their life in an essay with conviction, because you cannot show any doubt. Right. You can show doubt, but most kids will not, because they know that if you show doubt, then they're not going to know where to place you. But a lot of kids, will still end up doing it. They'll show that conviction in what they want to do. And I think on the basis of that, they're going to create your application story. So to get into the mindset for me, it was very helpful to think backwards and think about how someone will pick up my application and go through it. And I'd say that if someone in your school picked up your essay, for example, and they covered the name, they should be able to tell it's you, because it needs to be that unique and it needs to be that tailored to you. And I feel like one of the best ways to do that is something I call intersectionality, which is you layer a few things about yourself which only you possess. So a lot of people might be filmmakers, for example, a lot of people might be working in the field of disability, but how many people had done both? Or how many people would throw that in with entrepreneurship and intersect all three of those things? So then your story becomes a lot more specific to you. So instead of becoming, oh, Shaurya the filmmaker, I'm now Shaurya the filmmaker who works as advocating for disability rights, who also created a startup, all in high school. Right. So that is now a pitchable story, because they're like, okay, that's a kid who will, I can see exactly what they do on Stanford. I can imagine the kind of opportunities they'd utilize. I can imagine the kind of classes they take. And then it becomes a lot easier for them to see you as this one data point in the entire class. So they'd be like, okay, I want one of Shaurya because, he's interested in film, disability, entrepreneurship. I want one, Karan, for example, who's done stem cell research. So, they're picking all of these different kids who have all of these different stories. So it's very important for you to figure out what you think your story would be and try to make it as unique and specific to you, and then really work towards achieving some degree of excellence in that.
Right. A lot of students in school kind of feel like, oh, we do not have the opportunity, or, the opportunity will come to us. Like, how do you create that opportunity, which you created in your case? How does one go around it? Like, oh, maybe I'll try this, maybe I'll try that. How does that work out?
Yeah, I think it's a product of a few things. I think one, the first of which I'll definitely recognize is privileged. If I did come from a privileged background. I grew up in a family which had these conversations and gave me the ideas to do this. But the reason I started a YouTube channel was so that I could give the ideas I had in my head to people who might not have these or had these ideas yet. And I think that's all you really need to do. You need to see the idea in a student's head that they can go out and do this. And for me, it's always been a mindset less about, oh, is someone giving you an opportunity, or as compared to, oh, what opportunity can I grab for myself, or what can I create for myself? I think, especially if you talk about entrepreneurship, the best thing about it is if you don't see someone offering the value offering the value you want to offer, you offer that value yourself. So I didn't see anyone giving jobs to people with disabilities around me. So I said, okay, I'll make the organization and try to do it myself. So I think that initiative is something that someone needs to tell you, or you need to realize you have to take, because people are going to be coming from so many backgrounds, and if you're still thinking on the level of, if you want to do an MUN, you want to do a debate, you want to do acting, and you look at your school and say, oh, but my school doesn't give acting classes, and you stop over there. If you fall at that hurdle, then there's no chance you're going to be able to make it. If I wanted to act and my school didn't offer an acting class, I'd be like, okay, fine, I'll round up a few kids and go create a club in school to have an acting club in school. I'll reach out to a few maybe National School of Drama professors and ask them whether they could come give a webinar at my school. We'll put up a production at the end of the year. That initiative is something that's, one, going to make sure you boost your extracurriculars, but two, shows a value that's very important to colleges, which is, you stepping outside of the classroom and creating an impact all by yourself. And when colleges look at that and they know that you've come from a resource deprived background, you might not have had these opportunities before, and they see that you've created them, they know that when they put you in a place like Stanford, which is a resource surplus institution, you'll thrive. Like, nothing is going to stop you. So I think that's very important to recognize.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's awesome, man. What are your thoughts on IITs, NITs, BITS, Indian colleges? What are your thoughts on that?
I know that they weren't for me, because I did apply for psychology and economics, so definitely not a technical student. My father, on the other hand, was definitely one. He went to DIT, which is the Delhi Institute of Technology.
Isn't that DTU now? Or?
Yeah, that's DTU. Yeah, that's my bad. My father's going to kill me for messing up that acronym. But yeah, it had multiple names. But I think that, it's a very focused path of learning. And I think, especially when it comes to them and, the Indian curriculum or the Indian standard of higher education, like the JEE or the NEET, that is a path that will take all of your time. And I know a lot of students burn themselves out in trying to choose between one or the other. And I think you have to make that choice. Like, at the end of the day, you're going to have to focus all of your efforts somewhere, because if you don't put 100% of yourself into something, it might not work. So if the US and if you're not going to choose between one of them, know which one is your backup. Like, you can't call the US your backup but secretly love spending all of your time writing essays, doing extracurriculars. Then the US is not your backup, then JEE is your backup. So I think that prioritization of the path you want to take is very important. And also, especially when it comes to IIT JEE prep, be on the same page as your parents. I think it can cause a lot of conflict if you want something, they want something else. Like, they do want the best for you, and if they think something's not feasible for you, try to understand where they're coming from. And I think most of the dissatisfaction between US versus India just comes from that. It's the parent and child relationship. Right. One wants something, one wants something else. Finances come into the picture. So I think having conversations about that early on is very important and will just reduce a lot of conflict that you're going to have in your life.
A lot of stress, like a day-to-day stress, because I went to IIT coaching as well, and it was like kind of waste of my time. I see what my dad thought at the time, that, oh, maybe he has a chance, but I knew well all along that, oh, maybe I'll not fit into that, the rote learning and just learning. Like, I'm not as smart to get into an IIT, but he did his best. I did my best, and now it's like it all worked out at the end. But I kind of wasted my 2-3 years at that time, which shouldn't have happened. Tell us your long-term goal, like. Long term, I'd say 3 years, 2 years, or 5 years, or whatever you think is your long term goal.
Yeah, I think one of the inevitabilities of going to a place like Stanford is you'll have a startup. I do see myself being an entrepreneur only because I have a huge variety of interests. I dabble in psychology. I also want to learn computer science. I'm also really interested in economics. I also want to impact the world in a positive way. I also love filmmaking and communicating my message. And I think all of these things inherently will help you as an entrepreneur. I think they're things that if you recognize, for example, if you recognize the value of communication or visual arts, you might be able to communicate your product in a very efficient way. So whenever I gain a life experience or gain a skill, I always think in my head, at the back of my head, I'm like, okay, someday this is going to help me and be a part of my toolkit when I start my own company. So I definitely think that's on the cards. And then for my YouTube channel, I'd really want to, create a large community. I really like it. The only issue is YouTube is a platform where it only values you until you keep pushing in content into it. And I know in the future, I might not have enough time to push in content, but right now in my gap year, I do have the time and I won't have this time again. So I'm making the most of it and still like funneling towards that dream.
That's awesome, man. Keep at it. That's one thing. Once you stop making videos, YouTube kind of puts you on the back somewhere, and then it's like your views die
because
down.
They know that there's so many other creators who are creating videos every day, so they just immediately just like, oh, okay, value you more. Tomorrow there might be another Shaurya now with more time on his hands that might drop out of college and continue making videos like this, and hopefully does really well for himself.
Yeah, you can make a lot of money out of it, so that's for sure.
Exactly.
Anyways, that's all questions I had. Anything you'd like to add?
I definitely say, just as a piece of advice, don't stress about the US application process. I feel a lot of people, like in my comment section, I get like 12-year-olds and 13-year-olds who are worrying about it. It's all about having the right mindset when it comes to this, because at the end of the day, it's asking yourself, what would I do once I step out of the classroom? If someone had to tell a story about my life, what would that story be? It's a very numbers harsh process because, with immigration policies constantly changing, with college requirements constantly changing, the number of international students getting accepted constantly changing, you never know what they might do. And the United States is completely like, they can say no international students, and that's something you're going to have to accept. Like with India, Indian students are our first priority, and that should be the same thing for the United States. The United States citizens are the first priority they have. So just have all of that and just keep this core mindset of never giving up, chasing your dream, but also accepting the fact that, it might be subject to change. Like anything can happen, especially with the college application process. And I think with that mindset, you'll definitely go a long way.
That's awesome, man. Thank you so much for doing this. I really enjoyed it. I don't know how
Same.
much you
Thank
did.
you so much. I love this.
It was I've seen all of these. I've read a lot of documents on MIT's website, Stanford's, Berkeley's website on admissions, but to just put it together, that sounds really good, and it's an application in your case. So congratulations on getting into Stanford. When are you
Thank you so
starting now?
much, Parth.
Is it in August
Hopefully,
or
I
next
will
year?
start. No, I will be starting this September. I should hopefully be on Stanford's campus, and I'll send a picture to you if I reach it there
Yeah,
in one place.
that's not too far away then. That's
Yeah.
not too
Wait, where
far.
are you based? I never asked.
I'm in Phoenix. I'm in Arizona right now. So it's not
Yeah.
too far from the Bay Area. We're on the same coast almost, but still.
Right. No, definitely would love to do a little Indian college YouTuber meetup over there in the US someday. That'd be nice.
Definitely. Like Bay Area is something I would love to visit again.
Oh, that'd be perfect. No, but thank you so much for having me on the channel.
Yeah.
I definitely saw, you and like Yudi and Harnoor, definitely like the biggest like college YouTubers we've sort of generated. So for me, it's really like looking at the giants of this bubble we've created and seeing where to go
it is a
now.
bubble. It's a micro influencer sort of bubble, but it's nice because I was traveling with my parents. We were going to New Jersey to get some Indian food from New York, and we were in the subway, and two guys saw me and like, "Oh, you Parth, thank you so much for your videos." That's the nice moments I really cherish.
That's true.
The likes and the comments are nice, but like meeting in person to someone, that's really nice.
That's true. Hopefully, when COVID-19 is done, I can have a few in person, like
for sure,
people recognizing me.
All right, thank you so much, guys, for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.
Thank you, guys. Bye.
How do I stop?